What's going on, everybody? How y'all doing? Hope y'all doing well today. Want to hit on this because it's very important to me. Um, there was an article that went out last year that I think is very important that we need to touch on, especially on the heels of losing this young African American male. So there was, let me make sure I get his name correct. His name was Bryce Gowdy, and he's from Deerfield Beach, Florida. 17-year-old that was supposed to be graduating early and was going to be playing with Georgia Tech. This kid, had to be nice. I think he was going to be playing wide receiver possibly. Come to find out that sadly, before the year was out last year, before New Year, so December 31st, 2019, he had committed suicide. He jumped in front of a train and, of course, he took his own life. That's what the coroners had ruled as the cause of death. And so I said a pedestrian was struck by a train. It's very sad to see that. He was 17 years old. We wish his family condolences. They're definitely probably having a hard time right now. Now I want to link it to something else that's going on. The Journal of Community Health, they put out a article. The article was entitled "The Changing Characteristics of African American Adolescent Suicides, 2001 to 2017." Once again, the title was "The Changing Characteristics of African American Adolescent Suicide, 2001 to 2017." And they had some very interesting data. So basically, they said that there is a rise in the amount of suicide among African American adolescents. Now, when I was growing up, that was very, very, very rare. I mean, extremely rare. When I was young, you really didn't hear too many African American adolescents committing suicide. You normally heard that, seen that associated with Caucasian adolescents, but now it's on the rise. And the numbers and the statistics and the metrics are very scary. So they said between the ages of 13 and 19 years of age, which roughly equates to about 8th grade to about freshman year of college, right? The rate of suicide amongst African American adolescents has increased by 60% for males. That's crazy. But horrifically, it has increased by 182% for black females adolescents. So basically 3 times that of adolescent black males. These numbers are staggering and horrific. It is extremely scary. This is probably very scary times for parents these days. Now, let's go with some of the stuff that they mentioned. They said, now this is just in 2017, right? The numbers I'm about to give you just in 2017. It said, according to the study, 68,528 black males and 94,760 black females made suicide attempts serious enough to warrant treatment by mental health professionals in 2017 alone. That is crazy. That is crazy. Over 64,000 for black male adolescents and over 94,000 for black female adolescents attempted suicide that warranted treatment and intervention. This says a lot. And so another thing they said was accessible firearms in a household was one of the primary risks, the greatest risk that they focused on in intervention. What they say was the second form is just having, the second form of protection against suicide in adolescents is having readily access to mental health care, right? The other thing, and so they were talking about some stuff that they were doing for intervention in Ohio. All right, now check this out. It says statistics from the Ohio Department of Health's Ohio Violent Death Reporting System indicate youth suicides are most common among non-Hispanic whites, encompassing 8.4 per 100,000 among youth between the ages of 10 and 4. Black youth made up 5.8 per 100,000. Ohio statistics show females are more likely to attempt suicide, but 78% of youth who completed suicide were male. And so they give a little bit more insight into this. In 86% of youth suicide cases, Ohio investigators were able to determine the circumstances surrounding the death. These data offer further insights into the victims of youth suicide. So they get into the mental and behavioral health. They said 44% had a known mental health diagnosis. 27% were currently in treatment for mental illness. 25% of victims had a depressed mood. 5% were alcohol dependent. 19% had another substance use problem. And then they had current problems. 38% had an intimate partner problem at the time of death. 21% had experienced a crisis in the past 2 weeks. And other types of problems, such as school, financial, criminal, were much less common. So they're saying schools are being the leading provider of mental health services for youth. And so this is where they're saying they want to start with some of the biggest points of intervention and impact to prevent these suicides amongst young African-American adolescents. And so, like I said, the age range is from 13 years old to 19 years old. If you are a parent, you have children within that age range, you definitely need to stay in contact and communication with them. There's a lot of things I have to say about that, this whole situation. One, as parents, you gotta stay in communication with your children. Have a very, very, very healthy communication where they can talk to you. They shouldn't feel like they can't talk to you about anything, all right? Because once they start hiding things and, they're going to want a little privacy here and there. That's understandable. But to the point where they feel like they can't talk to you about their emotions and stuff like that, that's when you know you're going to have a problem. And if they don't know how to remedy, their emotions or reconcile their emotions, they may end up being within that percentage that are at risk for suicide. Another thing is this: I think that in today's times where everything's on computer and we're dealing with Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, social media has a tremendous influence. When I was in high school, we always dealt with like peer pressure and things like that. But just imagine peer pressure on crack. This is like social media and the internet is like peer pressure to the third power, because everything is instant and things go viral. They can have an embarrassing moment that lives on forever in eternity once it's on social media. And, kids, they can, a lot of times, that stuff, you never know how it impacts a kid. That embarrassment, the shame, they feel like they can't live it down. And they, when they're young, they think that's everything to them. And so, whether they got into a fight and lost, or got embarrassed, had a bad relationship and, people making fun of them or something like that type of stuff, you gotta let them know, hey, you can move on from that. You can recover from that. I've had the situation when I was growing up. It's not permanent. Don't worry about it. Focus on other things. You have to have that communication. Also, with social media comes this whole reality TV and the belief that things that people see, that they see on social media is reality. And we know 95% of stuff that is on reality TV and that what we see on the internet and on Facebook and Instagram, a lot of stuff it's not reality. This stuff is staged, it's posed, it's filters, it's everything is, even people's bodies is augmented from plastic surgery to Botox and, it's just, it's a lot. People using steroids to look like they're bigger than they are. So these things, so when they start seeing these things, they feel inadequate. They feel like they don't meet the standard, where the standard is really false. So it's having a negative result on their psyche. Also, I think the way society is now, where the cost of living is so high. And in order for you to keep up with the cost of living, parents are having to work 2 and 3 jobs, extra shifts, and so the parents are not at home when the child needs that development, needs that attention, needs that care, consideration, and concern, or for when they need to voice their, their emotions. Their parents at work, knocking out that second shift, knocking out that third shift. And not only is it just that their parents are not there, who is substituting that presence? Is it a bad, is it somebody of bad or negative influence that might be telling them to do hazardous things, And like you said, the primary risk for suicide was accessibility to guns. So if the parent is not home most of the time because they're working 2 and 3 jobs, but that gun is home, and then God forbid they got bad peer pressure in their ear, now they're playing with the guns, and you can kind of see where it goes, Another thing I'll say too is these designer drugs, you have this ecstasy, you have Molly, you got bath salts, crocodile, you got this new generation of marijuana that's out there. You've got alcohol. All these things are playing a part, especially in a young person. Their brain is still developing, So a lot of these things, you never know how these things will impact them and impact them emotionally and even biochemically. Like, you just never know. These street drugs, you don't know what they're putting in these things. You do not know. You could get them hallucinating, and they can do all type of things, jump off bridges, whatever, jump into traffic. God forbid they're playing with a gun while on these designer drugs. You see what I'm saying? The rabbit hole can go deep on this. And then I also say this too, is prescription drugs. I believe that we, see, when I was growing up, very rarely, I didn't even know. I mean, you probably wouldn't know, but like when I was in junior high, I didn't know any of my peers or friends that were like taking prescription drugs, but now I think it's like starting around like the early to mid 90s, they started really prescribing like Ritalin and Prozac and all these drugs for Paxil for a lot of these youth. You even start them off like when they're like in elementary school. And so they'll say, oh, the kid has ADHD, he can't concentrate, he can't focus, or he's depressed, he needs a mood stabilizer. I'm very torn between that. I feel that maybe if appropriately, like really, really, really assessed, like really a thorough assessment to see if there's something that needs chemical intervention, then maybe. But I think a lot of times a child just may be just hyperactive. I mean, kids are just hyperactive, but you automatically having teachers making referrals to go to see a nurse and a doctor and, hey, put them on this, put them on that, put them on this. And one thing that people always ignore when you deal with these serotonin reuptake inhibitors, right? These are like your Prozac and Paxil and stuff like that. When you deal with these serotonin modulating drugs and reuptake inhibitors and things, you don't pay attention, but all of them have a black box warning on them that says these drugs may cause suicidal ideation, meaning people are prone to committing suicide or thinking suicidal thoughts. They all have that. All serotonin reuptake inhibitors and a lot of your mood stabilizers and antidepressants, and they use these for off-label uses for ADD, ADHD, depression. All these things, they kind of like cross over onto each other depending on the indication of use, and they'll use them and prescribe them for off-label uses, but they have the black box warning that says they cause suicidal ideation. And on top of that, it says it causes suicidal ideation in youth. So here we're looking at the body of work from 2001 to 2017 to right around the time when they kind of just started the prescribing of medication of these, serotonin reuptake inhibitors and other mood stabilizers to kids when they were in elementary school, and they have them on this stuff all the way up until their 20s. That clearly tells you in the prescription, in the box, the package insert from the manufacturer, that tells you it causes suicidal ideation in youth, and we're prescribing them to youth like it's candy. And then by the time they get to 13 and 19 years of age, we now see this surge in suicide. We have to start connecting the dots here. Are we contributing to this spike in suicide among African American adolescents by not correctly diagnosing and having real interventions and assessments, and just being too quick and hasty to put our children on medication, right? Some could probably use meditation instead of medication, and other forms of therapy, right? The other thing I say is the stress in society. We're in a very high stress society. Poverty plays a big part. And then also, lastly, I say is we have a very high African American orphan rate. We have a very high orphan rate. And so with that, you have to think about all the stuff that I mentioned before and just raise that to the third power, because these children don't have any adult in their life that has a vested interest in them as a real parent would. I'm not talking about the group homes manager. I'm talking about like a parent that says, this is my offspring and I'm going to care and protect and do everything. So orphans, they don't have real somebody has a financial interest in them to make sure that whatever they need that can be taken care of financially, they don't really have that. They don't have anybody that really cares for them. It's a lot. It's a whole lot for an orphan. And also, once they hit 18, they age out the system. And so they get no care. They're just out on the street by themselves, not knowing really what life is or what it is to be loved. They find love the hard way. So with that said, that's where I was going with this. And once again, have that conversation with your children, know who they're hanging with, know what they're doing online, be in constant contact with the teacher, always trying to have healthy interventions and moments and breaks from, the computer, have times where they're just interacting with nature, go out on hikes, go play outside, whatever, go to the park with them, go camping. I think all that is good. And, you need to have these conversations and make sure that they're thoroughly assessed by healthcare providers before placing them on medication, and look for those black box warnings. If you go to get it, if they prescribe medication for your child, go to the pharmacist and ask them to review the package insert and ask, does this have a black box warning for suicidal ideation for this medication? I would like to know, And like I said, to the family of, we said it was Bryce Gowdy, we definitely give you our condolences. So with that said, I'm out, and take care. Peace.